I am Sassan Saatchi. I'm a senior scientist at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory at California Institute of Technology, which is a NASA center in Pasadena, California. And my background is engineering and physics, electrophysics, and I work on looking at how forests interact with climate and the global carbon cycle. I have been invited to come to Colombia to work with few scientists, groups, to look at REDD projects, reduced emission from deforestation and degradation, specifically in the Pacific coast of Colombia. And we are planning to, in the next few days, to design some projects where we can actually do some measurements with remote sensing data and ground field measurements, and develop the monitoring system. One of my specialty is to look at data that gets collected by the satellites at different scales and looking at the forests. And with these satellites operating in different frequencies and wavelengths, it's very much possible to look at the forest structure, such as tree heights and volume. And then once we have these things, we can actually estimate the amount of the carbon stored in these forests. And this is extremely important because once you deforest, this carbon gets released to the atmosphere. And by keeping the forests, we can actually not only preserve our biodiversity on the land and forests, but also stop emitting carbon to the atmosphere. One of the interesting things about using satellite observation is for areas which are very remote and far, where it's very difficult to have a very effective monitoring tool. You can use the satellites to see exactly what is going on the land. Has it been cut? Has it been degraded? And sometimes the resolution of these satellites is like the pictures you get with your camera. It's so high that you can actually see small patches of forest, few meters, and you can monitor the activities of the people on the ground. So it's a great tool for governments to monitor their territory, and it's a great tool for conservation groups and NGOs to use to look at what areas has been damaged, what are the areas that they can protect. In this time where REDD is becoming a reality, the use of the satellite observation for monitoring deforestation globally is becoming extremely effective. REDD is a plan that basically has been brought up within the world community, within the United Nations, by the participants, meaning countries, to see how we can reduce the emission to the atmosphere. So the global community is coming together, develop these protocols within the United Nations, which is called Reduce Emission from Deforestation and Degradation, where countries sign on it and they try to reduce their deforestation. So there are several interesting impacts of it. One, it helps to preserve forests. Second, it has the potential of creating a market globally where forest that has been preserved and is left alone to sequester carbon, to gain carbon, come to the market, and people who own those forests to be able to get benefit from them. So it would kind of reduce the effect of deforestation by bringing some level of resources to the communities who own these forests or live in the forest. It's a step towards preserving the especially tropical forests, which are the source of the biodiversity globally. MRV systems are basically a series of protocols and rules that needs to be followed once red projects are settled, to basically be able to monitor the activities and verify them and report them both into the international community as a nation and also at the smallest scale. From my experience here in the past few days, I think Colombia is extremely advanced in terms of their infrastructure to develop RED and MRV systems. They're extremely talented and educated groups here, very much advanced to the international level in terms of monitoring the forests, listening to IDM and folks from the ministry to show their results. I think, based on my experience traveling in other places in the world, I think Colombia is extremely advanced in terms of the use of high technology and resources to do the monitoring. If those projects and data sets get shared with the community and NGOs and other groups, I think the RED and MRV systems can be really working in Colombia. In general, I think RED can be an opportunity for communities. All projects have been funded to develop mechanisms where communities can benefit from the funding that comes in and then helps the forest to be set aside or preserved. And I think the mechanisms become more clear, and then once they become clear, then I think the communities would realize that they would benefit from them, and because it brings resources directly to the community. So it is something that is going to evolve by participation of communities. I think the indigenous communities have some advantage because they know very much what is going on in their community and in terms of their natural resources available to them. It's very important for practitioners or activists in the communities to get more knowledgeable and involved in the RED projects, to bring that knowledge back to the community. So this interface between what is happening internationally, globally, with a complex system of exchange of funding and money for carbon can get translated in a very tangible way to the community. So my suggestion is actually to participate more, to bring the knowledge back to the community so the community understands exactly how this thing is going to work. It has one of the largest tropical forests in the world, and also forests in other regions, in the Pacific regions. And I think Colombians are very concerned now, as I see it, about their environment. So I have been always impressed by Colombians because I think it's a country with amazing resources and intelligence, and I think especially in the area of the environment, there are a lot of groups and interesting people here who are really concerned about the environment in Colombia. I have been working a lot in Brazil and in Peru, and to some extent in Ecuador, and also a lot of countries in Africa. And I think in comparison, I think Colombia is already very advanced in understanding the environment and using the technologies available to monitor and to implement RED projects. Colombia has some of the most beautiful landscapes in the world. An example of it is right behind me in the city of Bogota. And I think protecting these landscapes and these beautiful resources are extremely important, regardless of how much we benefit from them in terms of food and fiber and biodiversity and water. But the pure beauty of it, I think it's important to be preserved. And I hope Colombians, like other communities in the world, like all of us, we help each other to really preserve these forests. BIOREDD projects in Colombia, once it gets implemented, it can be a good role model for other projects to kind of look at it and follow it, because they have been thinking about so many interesting details. The message is, write on, go ahead.